My name is Jocelyn Miller, 38 years old, and I used to believe my financial sacrifices could buy my family's love. On a freezing late November night in Columbus, Ohio, I drove through a blinding snowstorm to bring a custom birthday cake to the house I paid for cash. Standing on the porch, I didn't get to ring the doorbell before hearing my own mother raise her glass inside, saying she wished I wouldn't show up and ruin their night with my arrogant presence. My younger brother laughed, adding that he wished I had never existed in this family at all. 8 years of covering their mortgage, funding their lifestyles, and asking for nothing in return were met with absolute contempt behind my back. Instead of shedding a single tear or causing a scene, I pushed the door open, walked straight into the dining room, and smiled at the frozen room. I calmly announced that first thing Monday morning I would be officially listing the entire 5-bedroom property for sale, giving them 30 days to pack up and get out. If you want to see how a betrayal like this transforms an enabling sister into a relentless strategist who reclaims every penny, hit that subscribe button right now, so you don't miss a single moment of this ultimate showdown. The silence in the dining room was so heavy that the ticking of the antique clock in the hallway sounded like hammer blows. 8 pair of eyes stared at me in complete paralysis as I calmly pulled out an empty chair at the head of the long oak table, sat down, and served myself a generous portion of roast beef. My mother, Rhonda Miller, sat at the opposite end, her wine glass suspended mid-air while her face drained of every ounce of color. Next to her, my younger brother, Travis Miller, sat frozen with his fork halfway to his mouth beside his wife, my sister-in-law, Amber Miller, whose eyes darted frantically between me and her husband. I cut a small piece of meat, chewed slowly, and savored the absolute terror filling the room before taking a slow sip of ice water. The golden chandelier above us cast a warm glow over a feast paid for entirely with my hard-earned money inside a grand home that existed solely because of my relentless work ethic over the past decade. I set my fork down with a soft, deliberate clink against the porcelain plate and looked directly at Mom. I reminded the entire table that 8 years ago I withdrew $610,000 in cold cash from my personal investment portfolio to purchase this 5-bedroom luxury home outright. I explained in a cold, matter-of-fact tone that I had allowed Travis and Amber to reside here completely rent-free, under the strict condition that they would responsibly maintain the property taxes and utility payments, treating my generosity as a stepping stone rather than a permanent entitlement. They had turned my benevolence into their personal kingdom while treating me like an unwelcome intruder whenever I stepped through the front door. The smug arrogance that had defined their faces just moments ago on the porch was replaced by an overwhelming sense of impending doom. Amber attempted to clear her throat, forcing a high-pitched, uneasy chuckle that echoed awkwardly off the tall dining room walls as she adjusted her diamond necklace. She looked around the table, trying to convince the silent guests that I was simply pulling an elaborate birthday prank on Mom to get back at them for starting dinner early. She assured everyone with a strained smile that family always takes care of family, and that I would never actually throw my own blood out into the freezing winter air over a tiny misunderstanding. I cut her off before she could finish her sentence, holding up a single hand to instantly silence her nervous rambling. I turned my attention away from her and locked eyes directly with Travis, demanding that he take out his keychain and hand over the smart key fob to the high-end luxury SUV sitting in the driveway. I stated clearly that the vehicle was fully registered and insured under my name, and since he considered my presence such a burden on his life, he no longer possessed the privilege of driving my $70,000 asset. Travis slammed his fists onto the mahogany table, making the wine glasses rattle as he shouted that I was being completely insane and petty over a casual joke. He refused to give up the keys, arguing furiously that he needed the luxury vehicle to drive his children to private school and maintain his professional image among his business associates. Without raising my voice or showing a single flicker of emotion, I pulled my smartphone from my coat pocket and opened the dealership's remote management application. I informed him with absolute composure that I had 30 seconds to receive the physical keys, or I would press a single button to remotely disable the vehicle's ignition, permanently lock the transmission, and immediately dial the Columbus Police Department to report a stolen automobile sitting right outside. I added that having police cruisers with flashing red and blue lights pulling into the driveway during Mom's birthday gathering would certainly make an unforgettable story for all the neighbors in Upper Arlington. Mom gasped, clutching her chest dramatically as she begged me to stop ruining her special night. But I kept my eyes fixed on Travis while the digital clock on my phone screen ticked down. The reality of a criminal record and public embarrassment smashed through his bravado, shattering his stubborn resistance completely. With trembling fingers and a face red with fury, Travis reached into his leather jacket, unhooked the sleek metallic key fob, and slammed it down onto the tablecloth so hard that a wine glass overturned, spilling dark red liquid across the white linen. I picked up the key fob, inspected it carefully to ensure it was the correct remote, and slipped it safely into my designer leather handbag. I stood up from the table, smoothed out the front of my wool coat, and looked around the silent room one final time without a trace of remorse. I walked out of the warm dining room, stepped back into the freezing late November rain and slush, and climbed into my car to drive away into the darkness. On Saturday morning, as the winter sun barely crested the fog over Columbus, I sat at my computer with a hot cup of coffee. I logged into my online banking portal with steady hands and a completely clear mind. Within a few clicks, I transferred $50,000 out of our shared contingency fund directly into my private wealth management account. That money was entirely earned from my own career, yet I had spent years letting my family treat it as their personal slush fund. Next, I accessed my primary credit card accounts and officially revoked the authorized user privileges for both Rhonda and Amber. I watched the portal confirm that their high-limit physical cards were instantly deactivated, effectively terminating the endless stream of luxury purchases they had grown accustomed to charging to my name. 4 hours later, the heavy iron knocker on my downtown high-rise apartment door began pounding violently, echoing through the foyer like a frantic war drum. I glanced at my security camera feed on my phone, which showed Travis pacing back and forth with a flushed face, while Rhonda clutched her expensive leather purse with white knuckles. They had evidently just returned from an extravagant shopping trip at the upscale Easton Town Center Mall, only to experience the deeply embarrassing reality of having their transaction rejected at the checkout counter. I walked over to the entryway, unlatched the heavy deadbolt, and opened the solid oak door just a few inches, leaving the heavy brass safety chain securely fastened across the gap. Rhonda immediately thrust her face toward the narrow opening, her eyes wide with rage, as she demanded to know why her card had been declined in front of a dozen wealthy shoppers. She accused me of trying to publicly humiliate her, declaring that no respectable daughter would ever subject her own flesh and blood to such utter degradation over a minor disagreement. When she realized that her outbursts were having zero physical impact on my expression, Rhonda quickly pivoted into her favorite tactical role of the heartbroken victim. She clasped her hands together through the narrow gap, her voice dropping into a shaky tremor as she brought up the memory of my late father. She asked how I could possibly stand there looking so cold and unfeeling when my father had always taught us that family should protect each other above all else. She claimed that my father would be turning in his grave if he could see his eldest daughter acting with such ungrateful selfishness toward the people who raised her. Amber pushed herself to the front of the frame, thrusting her smartphone through the crack, while her voice cracked with venomous intensity. She threatened that if I did not instantly restore their card limits and transfer $20,000 to cover their upcoming holiday expenses, she would launch an all-out social media campaign against me. She vowed to post detailed accusations across every professional networking platform, labeling me a heartless, abusive fraud who abandoned her elderly mother, ensuring that my reputation among my corporate clients in Ohio would be completely destroyed before the weekend was over. I listened to her aggressive ultimatum without interrupting, taking a slow sip from my coffee mug as the silence stretched across the hallway. I reached over to the side table, picked up a neatly bound folder containing 8 full years of certified financial statements, and held it up directly in front of her camera lens. I informed her in a low, icy tone that I held comprehensive itemized records, proving I had personally funded nearly $700,000 toward their housing, vehicles, personal credit bills, and luxury vacations since my father passed away. I looked Amber straight in the eye and warned her that the moment she posted a single libelous word online, my legal counsel would file an immediate civil lawsuit against her for intentional defamation and tortious interference with business relations. I reminded her that under Ohio state law, a court judgment of that magnitude would result in the permanent garnishment of her future wages and the immediate seizure of any personal assets registered under her name. I added that while I possessed the financial capital to sustain a prolonged legal battle in court for years, she and Travis did not even possess enough liquid cash to pay their own phone bill for the upcoming month. Amber's confident posture collapsed instantly, her phone slipping lower as she exchanged a terrified glance with her husband, who stood entirely speechless behind her. Rhonda opened her mouth to launch another desperate appeal using my father's memory, but I simply looked at them both with complete detachment. I told them that their endless psychological games and financial parasitism had officially reached an absolute end. Without another word, I stepped back from the entrance, closed the thick timber door firmly against their frantic shouting, and locked the heavy deadbolts into place. At 10 o'clock sharp on Monday morning, the winter sunlight reflected off the car windows as I stepped onto the front porch with my private lawyer. Accompanied by my real estate attorney, Trevor Ross, and a professional listing photographer carrying high-end camera equipment, I stood firmly on the cold concrete steps, ready to prepare the property for the market. Before I could even reach for the brass door handle, the front door swung open, and Travis stepped outside alongside Amber, both forming a human barrier across the threshold with their arms tightly crossed. Their faces were twisted with defiance, clearly believing that physical intimidation would prevent us from setting foot inside the house I owned. Amber immediately put on a dramatic performance, tears welling up in her eyes as she pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of us. She screamed hysterically into the receiver, claiming that an aggressive group of intruders was attempting to break into her private residence and harass her family. She loudly demanded immediate police intervention, casting pitiful glances toward the surrounding houses to ensure the neighbors were watching the spectacle unfold. Travis stood beside her with a smug grin, believing that calling law enforcement would instantly force me to retreat and delay my plans to liquidate the home. I simply folded my arms, leaned against the porch railing, and shared a calm, knowing look with Trevor as we waited in the chilly air. Within 7 minutes, 2 official Columbus Division of Police cruisers pulled up to the curb with their emergency lights flashing, drawing several curious neighbors onto their front lawns. 2 officers stepped out of their vehicles and approached the porch, assessing the tense scene, while demanding that everyone remain calm and state their purpose. Amber immediately rushed down the steps toward the officers, weeping uncontrollably while pointing an accusing finger at me and accusing me of trespassing on private property. Trevor stepped forward with absolute professionalism, unzipping his leather briefcase and presenting a certified portfolio of legal documentation directly to the lead officer. He handed over the official deed, showing my exclusive sole ownership of the 5-bedroom estate, along with government-issued identification proving my identity. Furthermore, Trevor produced time-stamped digital receipts and physical delivery confirmations proving that a formal 24-hour notice of entry had been lawfully served to the occupants via certified email and text message on Sunday morning, fully complying with Ohio Revised Code landlord-tenant regulations. The lead officer thoroughly examined the deeds and time-stamped records before turning toward Travis and Amber with a stern, no-nonsense expression. The officer informed them coldly that I was the sole legal owner of the property and possessed every legal right to access the home for professional real estate proceedings. He explicitly warned both of them that continuing to physically block the entrance or filing false police reports would result in their immediate arrest for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. The smug confidence completely drained from Travis's face as the officer stepped aside to clear a path for us. While the officers maintained order on the driveway, Trevor reached into his leather folder and extracted an official legal document printed on heavy white paper. Right in front of the uniformed officers and the gathering crowd of neighborhood onlookers, Trevor served Travis directly with a formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises. Trevor stated in a loud, clear voice that they had exactly 30 days to clear all personal belongings and surrender physical possession of the property, or face immediate formal eviction proceedings in Franklin County Municipal Court. The public humiliation was absolute, as Amber covered her red face in utter shame, unable to meet the gazes of the neighbors whispering near the sidewalk. Realizing that their manipulative victim playing had failed completely against the unyielding force of the law, Travis grabbed his wife's arm, pulled her down the driveway, and quickly ushered her into their vehicle to escape the neighborhood's judging eyes. With the entrance clear and the police officers noting the resolution in their official log, Trevor and I unlocked the front door, allowing the photographer to step inside and begin capturing high-resolution photos of the spotless interior for the upcoming real estate listing. 2 weeks later, the for sale sign in the front yard was officially overlaid with a bright red sticker reading "Sold." However, the path to closing that transaction was not without one final desperate legal hurdle thrown in my direction by family members unwilling to accept reality. During the active listing period when real estate agents were hosting private walkthroughs for potential buyers, Travis had filed an emergency motion in Franklin County Common Pleas Court, seeking a temporary restraining order to freeze the sale. He claimed in his sworn affidavit that a binding oral contract existed regarding the property, asserting that our late father had intended for the 5-bedroom residence to remain a permanent family homestead for future generations. Travis had truly believed that filing a legal injunction would intimidate me into halting the sale, or force me into a quiet financial settlement behind closed doors. When Trevor Ross received the emergency court summons, he did not waste a single second worrying about the frivolous filing. Instead, Trevor immediately assembled a bulletproof evidentiary binder containing certified land registry deeds, tax assessment records, and the original closing settlement statement from 8 years prior. Everything clearly documented that I had purchased the home entirely with my personal funds 2 full years after our father had passed away, completely disproving any nonsense about an inherited family trust or ancestral homestead agreement. On the morning of the emergency court hearing, Travis walked into the courtroom looking remarkably arrogant alongside a low-budget legal representative he had hired on credit. When the judge took her seat on the bench and called the case, Trevor stood up with total calm and presented our overwhelming documentation directly to the court. Trevor methodically walked the judge through the financial trail, proving that Travis had never contributed a single penny toward the purchase price, the principal mortgage, or any capital improvements on the structure. Trevor also highlighted that Travis had been residing in the property as an uncooperative tenant who had recently been served a lawful 30-day notice to vacate. The judge spent less than 5 minutes reviewing our certified title documents before her expression turned visibly sharp toward Travis and his attorney. She sternly declared from the bench that a vague oral assertion could never override a clear, legally binding real estate deed registered with the state of Ohio. She reprimanded Travis for wasting judicial resources on a completely meritless filing designed solely to obstruct a lawful property transaction. Without hesitation, the judge dismissed the injunction request with prejudice, ruling that Travis had zero legal claim to the residence and ordering him to personally reimburse all of my legal expenses and attorney fees incurred while defending against his frivolous motion. With the frivolous court injunction officially dissolved and erased from the title record, the real estate market responded to the home listing with tremendous momentum. Because Upper Arlington remained one of the most desirable residential neighborhoods in the Columbus metropolitan region, a competitive bidding war erupted among multiple qualified buyers within 48 hours of the public listing. We received a clean, non-contingent cash offer from an out-of-state corporate executive who was relocating to Ohio. The buyer agreed to purchase the property for $660,000, which was $50,000 above our original asking price, with a swift 14-day closing schedule. The psychological impact of that rapid sale completely shattered whatever remaining pride Travis and Amber had been clinging to in front of the local community. The pristine, upscale lifestyle they had projected for nearly a decade dissolved as neighbors watched large commercial moving vans pull up to the driveway. Rather than hosting extravagant dinner parties or driving luxury automobiles around the tree-lined avenues of Upper Arlington, they were forced to pack their personal possessions into cardboard boxes under the watchful eyes of the neighborhood. The local social circle they had tried so hard to impress now viewed them as nothing more than freeloading opportunists who had been lawfully removed from a home they never owned. Unable to secure approval for a high-end luxury lease due to their lack of verified personal income and damaged credit profiles, Travis and Amber had no choice but to adjust their living standards dramatically. They ended up signing a 12-month lease agreement for a weathered 3-bedroom apartment located in an aging residential complex on the eastern outskirts of Columbus. The monthly rent was $1,800, an amount that would swallow nearly his entire paycheck now that my financial support had completely ceased. As they signed the lease papers in that cramped leasing office, the painful reality set in that their era of effortless luxury was permanently over. By mid-December, the warm ocean breeze of Miami greeted me as I stepped out onto the balcony of my 5-star oceanfront resort. The crisp, blue Atlantic waters stretched out before me, offering a striking contrast to the freezing snowstorms currently sweeping across central Ohio. After the real estate transaction closed seamlessly, I immediately allocated the $660,000 in cash proceeds directly into my diversified private wealth portfolio, securing high-yield investment returns that would compound for decades. Free from the emotional burdens that had weighed on me for years, I booked a first-class flight out of Columbus and checked into an exclusive coastal sanctuary in Florida for an extended winter retreat, ready to embrace a new chapter of uncompromised personal freedom. Back in Columbus, the stark reality of financial independence had transformed life for Travis into an unrelenting daily struggle for basic survival. Without my monthly financial subsidies absorbing their living expenses, their household budget imploded under the weight of accumulated debts, vehicle payments, and high-interest credit obligations. The modest income generated from his corporate day job proved entirely insufficient to maintain their lifestyle, forcing Travis to take on strenuous overnight shifts at a regional logistics warehouse near the airport. The physical exhaustion of moving heavy freight through 12-hour shifts rapidly eroded his health, turning the once arrogant man into a hollow, chronically exhausted shadow of his former self. For the first time in her adult life, Amber was forced to abandon her idle routine of luxury shopping trips and enter the workforce out of sheer necessity. Having no formal professional background or specialized skills, she faced countless rejections before finally securing an entry-level position as an hourly retail cashier at a local discount supermarket chain. Standing on her feet for 8 consecutive hours while scanning groceries for strangers shattered her fragile vanity completely. The harsh reality of earning minimum wage while managing hostile customer demands left her deeply bitter, as every single paycheck served as a painful reminder of the effortless luxury she had carelessly squandered through her own greed. The living situation deteriorated even further when Mom was forced to sell her remaining personal belongings and move into Travis's cramped 3-bedroom rental apartment on the eastern edge of the city. Having no personal savings or independent pension funds, Mom had relied entirely on my generosity for housing and monthly allowances, leaving her completely dependent on her son when my support ceased. The sudden loss of her spacious home left Mom feeling humiliated and anxious. And she brought her demanding, controlling habits directly into the small apartment, expecting to be pampered like royalty, despite the family's dire financial collapse. This forced cohabitation ignited a volatile daily feud between Mom and Amber within the confined living space of the apartment. With limited square footage and thin walls, minor domestic disagreements over household chores quickly escalated into screaming matches that echoed through the building every evening. Amber openly resented sharing her home with a mother-in-law who contributed nothing toward the $1,800 monthly rent, while Mom constantly criticized Amber's grocery choices, cooking abilities, and failure to maintain a proper household. They spent hours fighting over who was entitled to use the primary television, how to allocate the shrinking weekly grocery budget, and who was ultimately responsible for driving family members to work. Money became an unbearable source of constant friction that tore apart whatever superficial unity the family had once possessed. Every unpaid utility bill or grocery invoice triggered explosive arguments between Travis and his wife, with Amber accusing him of failing as a provider, while Travis retaliated by blaming her relentless spending habits for their downfall. Mom frequently intervened during these heated confrontations, tearfully demanding that her son show respect to his elders, while simultaneously complaining that her golden years were being ruined by their poverty. The relentless domestic chaos destroyed any remaining warmth in the household, leaving all three of them trapped in an atmosphere of mutual resentment and bitter regret. While they suffocated in the chaotic web of their own creation, I spent my afternoons strolling along the warm, sandy beaches of South Beach, sipping fresh iced tea and catching up on professional reading. My phone remained completely quiet as I had permanently blocked their phone numbers, social media profiles, and email addresses weeks ago. Sitting peacefully under the palm trees without a single worry on the horizon, I knew with absolute certainty that walking away from their manipulation was the most empowering decision I had ever made. 3 days before Christmas, as I was packing my bags in Miami to head to Colorado for a ski trip, my phone rang from an unknown number. I hesitated for a brief second before answering, pressing the speaker button while setting my leather jacket inside my suitcase. Travis's voice came through the line, completely devoid of his former arrogance, sounding desperate, ragged, and utterly humbled. He pleaded with me to listen before I hung up, begging for a $20,000 loan to cover their mounting credit card penalties and buy Christmas presents for his children. He claimed that Mom was weeping every night in their cramped apartment, consumed by unbearable guilt over how terribly they had treated me. I stood silently in my brightly lit hotel suite, listening to his trembling pleas without a single trace of emotion rising in my chest. I knew with absolute clarity that their sudden wave of remorse had nothing to do with genuine love or spiritual reflection. I plainly told Travis that they were not shedding tears of genuine regret for attacking my character, exploiting my generosity, or trying to drag me through frivolous legal battles. They were simply weeping because the endless tap of free financial capital had been permanently shut off, forcing them to confront the brutal realities of adult accountability for the very first time in their lives. I reminded him that for 8 long years I had quietly sustained their luxury lifestyle while being treated as nothing more than an open checkbook and an emotional punching bag. Every dollar I had provided was met with increasing entitlement rather than basic gratitude, culminating in their deceitful attempt to steal my real estate property. I informed him firmly that my financial obligations and emotional ties to every single one of them had officially expired the moment they tried to sabotage my life. Without allowing him another second to manipulate the conversation with hollow excuses, I disconnected the call and permanently blocked the new phone number on my device. I took a deep, refreshing breath, feeling an immense weight lift off my shoulders as the silence returned to the sunlit room. There were no tears, no lingering feelings of grief, and zero desire for future reconciliation, only a profound sense of inner peace and clarity. I zipped up my travel bags, pulled on my coat, and walked out toward the awaiting luxury sedan downstairs, ready to board a private flight to the snow-covered peaks of Aspen. Walking away from an inherently toxic family dynamic was not an act of malice, but the ultimate act of self-respect, ensuring that my future would be built on complete emotional freedom and unshakable self-worth. The heavy consequences of their greed continued to unfold for everyone who had tried to take advantage of my kindness. Without my financial backing to rescue them, Travis and Amber lost their leased vehicles to repossession and found themselves buried under mountain-high interest rates on defaulted personal credit cards. Mom spent her remaining years living in that modest, noisy suburban apartment, constantly arguing over daily expenses while watching her younger son struggle through double shifts just to pay basic rent. Their false facade of high society luxury completely evaporated, leaving them to bear the lifelong burden of their own selfish actions. This journey serves as a powerful reminder that real family is defined by mutual respect, honor, and authentic support, rather than toxic entitlement or relentless financial exploitation. Blood relations never give anyone a legal or moral license to abuse your generosity, drain your hard-earned wealth, or undermine your emotional well-being under the guise of loyalty. Setting unyielding boundaries and cutting off unrepentant manipulation is often the only way to safeguard your peace. Protect your mental health and reclaim ownership of your life. True strength lies in recognizing when a relationship has become purely parasitic and having the courage to walk away forever without guilt. Thank you so much to all of our incredible viewers for staying engaged and listening to this complete story until the very end. Your continuous time and attention mean the world to us as we share these meaningful life journeys. What are your personal thoughts on how Jocelyn handled her toxic family, and would you have made the exact same choice in her shoes? Please leave your valuable thoughts in the comment section below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe to support our channel for more inspiring drama stories.